About 4 years ago, when things at my last church were starting to spin out of control with false accusations, investigations, and me just sort of feeling really afraid because I didn't know what the future held, I was in a really dark place at that time. I never felt suicidal, but I do remember thinking to myself at one point, wow, now I understand why someone would feel like they would want to end it all. Maybe some of you have been in a place where you felt like you couldn't go on. Or maybe someone you love has been in that place and maybe even succeeded in taking their life. Jimm Greer is the founder and president of You Matter to Me, spelled UMTR, the number 2, ME, which is an organization that provides hope, encouragement, and counseling to individuals who are struggling with thoughts of suicide. In today's interview, Jimm shares his own story of struggling with mental health challenges and how those challenges led him to start You Matter to Me. Well, I'm Markus Watson, and this is episode 39 of Spiritual Life and Leadership. Well, I'm sitting here with Jimm Greer. Jimm is the president and founder of You Matter to Me, or spelled UMTR, the number 2, ME. Hi, Jimm. How are you doing?
Hey, good, Markus. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Jimm, why don't you just briefly tell us what you do with You Matter to Me, and then, share with us briefly.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me this morning. It's great to be here on this interview with you. I'm the founder and creative director of UMTR to Me, again, which stands for the phrase "You Matter to Me," and we are a local nonprofit organization based in Southern California, San Diego area. And what we do is we offer hope, support, and encouragement to individuals that are struggling with really anything in life that leads them to the point that they feel like they don't want to be here anymore. Typically, that's usually a depression, mental health challenges, and things like that. And so we try to meet with them, establish a personal relationship with them, find out what they're going through, if they need a little bit more help. Sometimes these individuals just need somebody to sit down and kind of talk with them and walk through the phase in life that they're going through. And then if they obviously do need a little bit more help, we locate resources in their area to help them. The nice thing about that is, especially in today's age and technology, we don't just do that in San Diego. We do that across the United States and even internationally. As a matter of fact, we just sent some bracelets a couple of days ago to Australia, to a girl in Australia. So that's what we do. We try to find out what people are going through with life and help them realize that, that they're important, that they do matter, and that we want them here. And so that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
Very, very cool. Awesome. Well, so we'll unpack a little bit more about that and why and how and all that as we go. But I want to start with these kind of opening get to know you questions.
Sure.
So the first question I got for you is, what job, Jimm, would you be terrible at?
Oh, well, that would be doing a podcast interview, probably.
What?
Not the interviewee, but the interviewer. But honestly, there's no way in the world that I could imagine ever seeing myself being a Starbucks barista.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It never lets up, man. I mean, you're starting up super early, and all those drinks that you got to make, and just the people coming in and expecting you to know what their specialty is. I couldn't do it. There's no way.
Yeah. It's so I would agree with that for myself. So, if I may, side story. When I was 17, like food services in general, which I consider Starbucks to be a part of, right? I just don't think I could do it. I worked at an Arby's for like 2 weeks when I was 17, and I just could not memorize how to make sandwiches. They had little cheat guides like above the workstation, and I always had to look at that. Okay, wait, how many ounces of roast beef, and and people would there was this other girl who had complained he can't memorize the sandwiches. So that would be I would concur with that.
And I'm sure, according to their commercials they got going now, they got the beef. They
Right.
got a lot more going
I
on.
know.
It's not just roast beef. It's like
That's right.
tacos now at
Oh
Arby's.
my gosh. Yeah, I couldn't do it. All right. So here, next question. Jimm, when do you feel truly alive?
When I'm sleeping. Nah, I'm kidding. I'd have to say I truly feel alive when I'm outdoors in nature. Whether I'm on the water or on the trail or on out riding my bike, cycling, definitely when I'm outdoors and typically alone.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Alone. It's just, that's an opportunity for me just to kind of just dial into, inside myself and just, my connection with God and just really appreciate things and just be able to take a moment back, obviously, especially with the way, we're so busy nowadays, but definitely outdoors in nature.
Oh, that's cool. And then last question, what would a mirror opposite of yourself be like?
Well, that one's even easier to answer. Yeah. The complete opposite, Jimm, would be confident and unabashedly outgoing, I'd have to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
I'm, for the most part, neither of those.
Oh, what?
I know. People will be surprised to say that. But no, I'm not usually the most confident person and definitely not usually outgoing. It seems like it, but I guess it just depends on the situations. But I'm pretty much like an introvert.
Okay.
To the T.
Yeah. Well, I am too. Cool. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself. And why don't you give us now a little bit more, just sort of about your life, your background, your spiritual background, kind of what brought you to where you are today.
I was born and raised in a Christian military family, spent most of our life in San Antonio, Texas. And I have a younger brother who, unfortunately, he passed away in 2007 at 32, and a younger sister. And currently she works and lives in Delaware, where my parents now live. But when I was younger, my father served in the Army. He was in the Vietnam War. And so naturally, we did a good bit of traveling and even lived in Germany for a few years. And that's actually where my brother was born at the time. And we used to actually, kids will be ruthless when they're young. And we used to tell him when we get in fights that he wasn't even an American. He was German. Oh, brothers and sisters can be ruthless to each other. But most of my childhood we spent in my teen years was pretty much growing up in Texas.
Okay.
I never really had much trouble making friends while I was in high school. And, high school for me was probably, I'd have to say, the best time of my life. And probably one of the most difficult times of my life because, that is when I had reached one of the darkest times and had attempted, to take my own life by suicide. But after high school, I served in the Navy and I was on the aircraft carrier, the USS John F. Kennedy, stationed out of Norfolk, Virginia. And when I had left the Navy, I got married and became the father of an amazing son who was actually born on Christmas Day. And that's probably one of the best presents, not one of, it's the best present I've probably ever received in my life. And so he's 29 and he lives in Maryland. Wow. And, my first marriage, unfortunately, didn't work out quite the way I'd hoped. But after 3 years after my divorce, I had eventually found and married, the most amazing Christian woman I could ever know, Yvonne. And, this year we're actually going to be celebrating 23 years of marriage. And so I am, it's kind of funny when we were dating and, up and through the first 3 years, I kept telling her after that, hey, we're in uncharted waters. So I think the longest relationship I ever had was 3 years of my first marriage. But it seems like every year after that, I kept saying, we're in uncharted waters and we're in uncharted waters. And now it's just after 23 years, I think we know where we're at.
That's just what life is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's awesome. Not really so uncharted anymore, huh? That's great. So, and then, I don't know, how long has it been since you started You Matter to Me?
We started it in August of 2012.
2012. Okay. Yeah. And what led you to start it? Like, what was the motivation and why was this something that mattered to you?
Yeah. without really going into the long story of the nutshell of it is that, after many years of, like I'd mentioned earlier, I'd attempted suicide when I was 18 in high school. And,
Mm.
I grew up, wasn't aware that I had, mental health challenges, and my parents, weren't aware of that either during, that time frame.
Hmm.
That was not really anything that was talked about or kind of discussed or really known too much about. And so I spent much of my life kind of, depressed and feeling alone. And, with my relationship with God, not understanding why I was feeling the way I was feeling and, why he wouldn't make me this happy individual. I certainly wasn't asking
Yeah.
him to really perform any major miracles, but just to kind of make me a happy kid. But,
Hmm.
life didn't work out that way. And so, after, when I got married to Yvonne, through the course of some counseling and some diagnosis and hospital stays and medications, was able to get my mental health challenges. I was actually at that time diagnosed with bipolar disorder, ADHD, and a bunch of other things like that. I probably have more acronyms after my name than most doctors
Mm.
do. But one thing I always knew is that I knew how difficult it was to try to explain to others what I myself didn't understand, and how lonely that felt. And so when I had reached a point in my life, I'd never been ashamed to discuss, my suicide or, my
Yeah.
mental health challenges. But once I got to a point in my life where things were going really good and I was not on medication, I was, managing my mental wellness through my healthy eating, active lifestyle, and relationships with my family, my wife, and God. I just knew that I had a choice to make. I could either continue living life like that, or I could take my experiences and try to help those, or at least walk alongside of those who were in the same situation that I had found
Yeah.
myself in. So
Yeah.
I just decided to go back and let people know that they matter, because a lot of times you don't feel it when you're in those places. That's the
Mm.
last thing you're feeling like. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted
Yeah.
to be a voice and just kind of help people and just be there with them, not have all the answers, but just walk with them and sit there. And when they didn't know what to say, trust me, I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very challenging to explain to somebody what you yourself don't understand.
Yeah. Um, so I love the name "You Matter to Me," and I think it's kind of cool the way the way you spell it, UMTR to me, ME. But maybe say a little bit more about why that name. And you kind of touched on it already, but why is it so important for someone to know that they matter?
Well, so the funny story with that is, like I said, I've always been willing to talk about and share my story. And I met with somebody, and I never really always have time to go into my story, or people always want to hear more about it. So, I decided I wanted to, create kind of I guess, a blog where I could just put my story up and people could read it.
Hmm.
And so, I started doing that. And when I was registering, I had to do an email. And I thought, well, if people want to reach out to me, I don't necessarily want to be using my personal contact information. So I'm like, well, I'll do the Gmail free account. So, again, we're living in the age of acronyms, and so I was like, well, I want to kind of keep it short and catchy, and I
Hmm.
really just started with like UMTR, because I wanted people to know that they matter. And when I
Hmm.
went to register with Gmail, they told me that that wasn't enough characters, and it kind of frustrated me. And I was like, what? I was like, well, that just frustrates me, because I think it's so important. I just want people to know that they matter to me.
Uh-huh.
And so then I was like, well, what about UMTR to me?
Hmm.
Registered that, and it worked through.
All right.
And so I think it's important because it's a phrase that is so easy to say, but
Yeah.
it's not said enough.
Mm.
Um, and it's a phrase that people need to hear and just don't hear enough.
Mm.
And I think it's when you tell somebody you matter to them, you have to. I don't know that you can really say that without meaning it.
Mm.
My wife will sometimes say, "Hey, I love you," and most, people say, "Oh, I love you too," and it's just kind of like
Yeah.
a ditto. But
Yeah.
to tell somebody that, "Hey, you matter to me," for me, that's a commitment, and that's what it was about. Is I really do tell people that, and just because I don't know them, that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
they don't matter to me, because I don't know what their purpose is in this life, but I just know that I at one point felt like I didn't matter, and
Mm.
nobody had, and no fault of anybody's, no, but nobody said, "Hey, Jim, you know what, you really matter to me, and here's why," or whatever. So
Yeah.
I just felt that that was important, and it's something that I think when someone's going through a difficult time, instead of always saying, "Hey, well, things get better, you just got to get through this or push through," I don't necessarily think people really, want to hear that. But when someone's in a dark place, to say, hey, listen, I know you're going through a difficult time, but I just want to let you know that you matter to me, and I want to help you. I may not understand what you're going through, but I want to try to understand what you're going through, and I want to do this with you. So
yeah, that's great. And maybe you can share a couple of stories, if you have any, of people that you've been able to help and help them know that they matter to you.
Well, I think one of the most impactful stories for me, it's a sign that I kind of have hanging over my desk here in the office, is when we launched our organization and we were on the social media platforms and Facebook. We post articles, and we would just post motivation type things, and just to try to encourage people. And sometimes when you do those things, you wonder. I think we live in an age of voyeurism, where people really they're on social media, they watch things, but they don't ever like really engage and interact a lot of times. And so I just kind of felt that's what was going on. And I was like wondering at one time, I was like, is this really even, is this, ironically, does this really matter to anybody? And
just the work that you've been doing with your organization, you mean?
Yeah, just, the
Yeah.
fact that like, okay, I know you got to be on like social media, but like, there's nobody like really doing anything. And I had received we had received a message in our Facebook, Facebook, and it's actually right on the other side of my desk. So if you can give me 1 second, I'm going to get up and grab it so I can read it to you. So on above my desk, I have this sign posted, and it was when we had probably within the first year that we launched. And again, really wondering, is anybody really, does this mean anything to anybody? And we received this message from a guy, and it says, I just want to share with you guys the fact that you guys saved my life. A few months ago, when I joined this page, I was actually in the process of going through my Facebook, saying goodbye, and getting ready to make another attempt on my life. The other two failed, obviously. As I was getting ready to close my browser and pick up my news, I accidentally opened your post. I read a few of the posts on your page, and I put down my news and cried. Sure, there might be times that I might be depressed, but all I have to remember is that someone cares. Thank you. And his name is Jordan. And I'm not going to say his last name, but his name is Jordan. And I had reached out to him, and that was when he was in high school. Jordan has since graduated high school. He is actually in the Air Force. He is doing fantastic, so much better. And I keep in touch with him. I reach out to him and just see how he's doing. And it's just one of those things that, again, saying something so simple means something to somebody. And so, that's one example. I have Jordan, and then I have another young girl who lives in Massachusetts, who had reached out to us. We have a text to talk line, and I had received a message one night, and she had was in her room, and she had a rope, and her family was in boating, and she had a rope, and she was going to hang herself. And we had talked, and at that time I had conferenced in the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline to help with her as well. And we had a good conversation. They tried to do the best that they could, and then when they were done, I didn't want to let that conversation go, because I just did not feel like we were in a good place yet still. So I kept talking to her, and so we ended up getting to the point where we were able to get to a good solid place, and she wasn't going to take her life, and she was going to get some help. And I have since still keep in touch with her, and through Facebook, and through social medias like Instagram and stuff like that. And so there while I say I've never actually been on the ledge with someone and talked them down, I guess I have, but remotely. And I just think those are just a few examples of people that sometimes you wonder, if you're getting through to people, and do people actually really feel it and believe it. And these are just two examples of people that I know that are doing well. They were in situational, I think to be like situational depression, and someone was there just to not necessarily have all the answers, but just willing to be there with them.
Yeah. One of the things I was wondering as you're talking is, maybe some of those listening have been through times where they have thought about taking their life, or maybe even tried, or they have loved ones or friends or family members who have, or there may be some in the future, we may encounter, or there may be someone that we care about who tries to take their life. Like, if you had to give any advice to anyone, whether they're thinking about suicide or they know someone, or will at some point, like, what would you say? How would you? Yeah, what would you say?
It's always tough. People will ask that, and the answer to that is just there is no answer, because
Mm,
at least for me, because every situation is different, every individual is different, and to try to have a cookie cutter type answer, I think that just doesn't seem real. But I can say, for those who know someone who might be going through a period in their life where they know that someone wants to take their life, or they've talked about it. The first thing is obviously not to be afraid to sit down with someone or talk to them and just say, hey, here's what I say. When I find out when someone contacts me and tell me that they're thinking about taking their life, there's protocol that you can go through depending on where they're at in their life, whether they've got a means, ready to do it, as far as what, they should do in getting them help. But for me, the first thing I ask people is why. Um,
mm,
the thing of it is nobody wants to take their life for no reason. There's a
you're
reason.
right.
And so for me, when you find out someone is in that situation, just to meet with them and just say, hey, I understand you're going through a difficult time and it's got you to this place where you don't want to be here anymore. I just want to understand why you're feeling that way.
Right.
Be first and foremost, just be a friend. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
don't pretend to try to understand what they're going through if you really don't have that experience, because they'll know that.
Yeah.
Don't be
Yeah.
don't be afraid to tell them, hey, I don't understand what it is you're going through, but I want to. I don't want you to go through that alone. So I want to try to help you with that. Um, be sincere is really just the first and foremost thing I'd say.
Mm,
For those that are in a situation where they're going through life and they're wanting to take their life, I always equate life as like the weather, especially living here in San Diego, where it's beautiful and sunny. The weather's not like that all the time. Sometimes we have some dark clouds. Sometimes we'll have a rain shower. And sometimes we have mudslides, wildfires, things that
mm-hmm.
completely devastate and destroy, and people have to rebuild. Well, life's the same way. You have good times. Sometimes you have days you feel a little blue. Sometimes there's life circumstances that happen that have to cause you to reestablish your life. You lose a loved one, you lose a job or something like that. Life is
Yeah.
the thing is you can't expect the sun to be always out every single day. So why should life be any different? So you just need to prepare for that. When you're listening
Yeah.
to the weather and you know it's going to rain, you usually throw your umbrella in the car just in case you get caught in a rainstorm. So if
Yeah.
you realize you're starting to feel a little blue, a little down and depressed, try to grab it, get a hold of it before it consumes you. Try to take control of it and let it, instead of it letting it control your life.
Yeah, that's good. And it sounds like if we have someone in our life that, is thinking about suicide, I mean, really it comes down to letting them know that they matter to us, right? That they are
Absolutely.
loved.
I,
That.
I have never, in any of the talks that I've done at the schools and military bases, or anyone I've talked to, and someone's been struggling, and I said to them, hey, I want you to know that you matter to me. I've never had any one person say, you don't even know me, or how do I
Hmm.
matter to you?
Yeah.
Because that's not what they're focused on. They're focused
Yeah.
on not feeling like they matter. And so for someone to say that you matter to me, that kind of catches them off guard, and it's like, really? And then, but you don't just say it, you let that's part of our whole bracelet campaign of why we have the bracelets. And when that point happens, I give my personal bracelet to someone, because I want them to know this is, I'm backing up my action with my talk with
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about like the bracelets. You mentioned that a couple times already. Like, how do you use those?
Yeah, so our silicone bracelets, they're black, and they come in black and they come in white, and they say "You matter to me," and they have the website
Mm-hmm.
on one side, and to serve as a resource for people that are feeling need some help. But the whole idea of it is that I wear my bracelets so that they face out, so that when people are looking at me reading it, they can read the message "You matter to me." And when I'm
Mm.
sharing my story and someone's sharing their story with me, I
Uh-huh.
take the bracelet off my wrist and I tell them that they matter to me. And when I put the bracelet on their wrist, I put it with the words facing them, so that
Mm.
the next time that they find themselves in a dark place, that they can look down at the bracelet on their wrist and know that they do matter to someone. That specific person, they're tied to it, and that there is also the website that can offer resources to help them. So
Yeah, that's
it's a
great.
personal connection.
That's cool. That's very cool. Um, one of the things that I appreciate about you. So let me give the listeners a little bit more background. So Jim was actually a member at my last church for, I don't know, not just a few years.
Yeah.
But I loved having Jim and his wife Yvonne at our church. Jim helped out with the soundboard, and helped out with the youth group a little bit. And when we were first getting to know each other, I remember you sending me an email, and I actually remember where I was when I got the email. You may not even remember this, but just sort of kind of just telling me a little bit more about yourself. And I was at Bethel Seminary in their library working on my sermon, which is where I used to do my sermon prep. And the way you described yourself, you said something like, I have a fierce relationship with God. And I was like, oh, like that's cool. Like I like that description. So I just wanted to ask you just kind of about how maybe talk about that in terms of, how God has prepared you over the course of your life for this particular ministry.
If it is fierce and hostile sometimes at times, I think. Well, as I mentioned, I grew up in a Southern Baptist Christian home, and we were probably in church more than we weren't in church. And I came to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And my relationship with God is probably one of the most dynamic aspects of my life. I mean, the times that I feel like I'm the closest to God are also the times that I feel the furthest from Him. And there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not trying to do everything I possibly can to find peace in my walk with God. And and it's not about a question of my salvation. I think it's just a realization of, I think for me, being more in tune of how much of a sinner I am and how much I don't deserve and how much I'm really unworthy of His love, and I'm really constantly trying to work at bettering myself with that. I mean, I often find myself relating, with the Apostle Paul and Martin Luther, in our continuing spiritual struggles. Those are two, individuals who also, it was Paul, the work that he was doing, and as close as he was with God. I mean, the struggles that guy went through. So, I mean, I find myself relating a lot with them, and that being said, I know in my heart that Christ is Lord of my life, and one day the struggle will end, and I'll find myself in His presence, glorifying and worshiping Him with an unabashed peace. But while I'm here on this earth, it is a constant struggle for me to make sure that I'm trying to get as close to Him as I possibly can. And the challenge with me is that with my mental health issues and the suicide is. That ultimately is one of the reasons I attempted to take my life, because I couldn't understand why God was I knew He was hearing my prayers. I knew He saw me cry. I could never understand why He wouldn't reach down and help me. And, at that point in my life, I just gave up and, took matters into my own hands, obviously. And thankfully He intervened and prevented that from happening. But, also the weekend, when we launched UMTR to me, I was, wasn't taking medication. I was in a good place, but I mean, as far as my treatment, my taking care of my mental wellness, but I still struggled with the depression, and I still, no matter what, kept asking God for this prayer to make me happy, and I could never understand why He wouldn't answer that prayer. And one weekend, my wife was traveling for work, and I was getting ready for work on a Friday, and I was just having a bad time, and I started to pray in the kitchen to ask God to help me, and I just started crying, and I got frustrated, and I told Him, I said, you know what, I'm just going to stop asking You to help me, because for whatever reason, I'm in my 40s now, and you just don't want to help me. You just don't want to answer that one prayer. And you know what, I'm just not going to ask it anymore. So we're done. And I went that following morning, Saturday morning, to a men's group that met at Mount Soledad. And it was a good time. We would do some worship, and we would be studying. And during, we were singing some worship songs there, and I just couldn't sing them. And we took a break, and sometimes the guys would interact and say something. And, I was sitting there, and I just told the guys, I said, you know what? I said, I just can't sing these songs of worship and praise, because I don't feel it. And I'm not ashamed. I'm ashamed of what I did. I'm not proud of what I did. But the only thing I could do is I just started crying and looking up at God. And all I could do was just tell Him how much I hated Him, how much I just hated Him for. That's all I could do. And I said, I looked up at Him, and I said, the thing that makes this the worst is I'm telling you that I hate you. And I don't even mean it, but that's all I can say. And at that moment, as weird as this sounds, I just kind of got this peace about my life, and I felt God. I thought I could feel God saying, if I give you what you want for your life, you can't give
Mm-hmm.
me what I want for your life.
Mm.
And it was that moment I thought, you know what? I said a different prayer. I said, God, you know what? I said, I don't want you to change me. I don't want you to fix me. I said, I just want you to help me get through this. And whatever it is you
Yeah.
want me to do, I'll do. And it was within 72 hours that, You Matter to Me was up and going. And so,
Wow.
yeah, God and I have a fierce relationship. I'm obviously more of the one who does the tugging. I don't think he does. I think
Yeah.
he's always there for me. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
fierce still at times.
That's cool. And how has your relationship with God grown, or how has God shaped you kind of since starting You Matter to Me?
Um, well, it's something that is dynamic, and it's continually
Mm-hmm.
changing. Each day, week, month, and year.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've drawn closer to him, and I kind of actually have a little bit more of that peace that I was looking for that I didn't
Mm.
seem to have, because I realized that sometimes the purposes that we're looking for our lives are not purposes that fulfill us. They're not something that we're supposed to be doing for ourselves. That's kind of hard to explain, but I just realized that my purpose in my life here wasn't for me; it was for God. And for me
Right.
to achieve that, I had to be willing to do whatever it was He wanted to do. And so I have found a little bit more of that peace with Him, and obviously spending more time in the Word with Him, and I'm just a little more. Um, okay, God, if this is how it is, or this is a situation that's come up, you've got it here for a reason. I know all about
Mm-hmm.
that. So I just,
Yeah.
if you're not gonna give me the answers, that's okay. Just help me get through this, or show me what I need to do. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like trust, right? A
yeah,
little bit more trust. Yeah. Which is, I think, what as we go through life and all these things, that's one of the things that I think just grows, right? We just, okay, I'll trust you. I'll
well,
trust
that's
you.
the one fantastic thing about God is I think He has more faith in me than I have in Him, and I think
Mm.
I'm very one of my prayers I'm always saying is I'm glad that He has. That He doesn't stop loving me, and He hasn't stopped giving up on me, because obviously, as individuals that struggle with, mental health challenges or depression, there's a lot of times that we give up on ourselves and don't love ourselves. And
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have someone that loves me, for
Yeah.
who I am in every aspect of it, and is not ever going to give up on me, in addition to my wife, has just
Yeah.
been, amazing.
Yeah. That's awesome. Man, Jimm, thanks for sharing all of this about yourself, fairly vulnerably, and then also about what you do with You Matter to Me. If people want to find you, how can people find you online, social media, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm off the grid. No,
Oh,
I'm just,
that's probably not effective. Just kidding.
that's true. Now, we obviously have a website. It's www.umtr, the number two, me.org. You can also find us on social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our
And
Yes.
then, so Facebook and Twitter, is that also like just
Yeah, it's
UMTR2ME?
pretty simple. It's just UMTR, the number two, ME.
Okay,
We don't make it
for
too
all of those.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
make it
great.
too
I'll have
complicated.
links in the show notes then for
Okay,
those.
perfect.
Okay.
And then, we have an email. You can reach out to us if you have any questions, info@umtrtome.org. And then
Okay.
our phone number is 760-440 UMTR, which is 8687.
Cool.
And we have a lot of great
All
information
right.
on our website and stuff like that. So I always, encourage people, if they want to learn more about us or what we do, that's a great place to start.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Jimm. Thanks for being here. And, thanks for the work that you're doing. Just really good, important stuff.
Hey, I forgot to say, if there's one thing I would like
Oh,
to leave
yes.
is just, I'd mentioned before, relating to Paul, and his thorn in his side that he, had prayed
Mm,
to get removed, and, God wouldn't,
yeah.
because, God's strength was shown in Paul's weakness. But, one of my life verses I like to just share with people is Philippians 1:6, which is, "And I am
Hmm.
sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to the completion at the day of Christ. In other words, that says until Christ comes to get us or until we pass away, we are always constantly evolving, and God is always doing something in our lives to get us to that point. We're never going to get to the pinnacle and just be able to sit back and say, hey, we've achieved what God wanted us to achieve. So, never give up on that, and always, find the hope in that promise from God.
Well, kind of a funny story. About a week before we recorded this interview, Jimm and I got together at a local Panera just to kind of talk about the interview and just so I could kind of give him an idea of what I wanted to talk about with him. And near the beginning of that conversation, Jimm, in his very humble way, said to me, so, why do you want to interview me? And I thought to myself, why wouldn't I want to interview you? What I said to him was something like this. I said, well, because you're leading a ministry that is restoring healing and wholeness for people who really need it, right? Your ministry is the way that God has called you to participate with him in restoring shalom in the world, and I think that people really need to hear what you're doing. And so I'm really grateful for Jimm Greer and for his ministry to those who struggle with thoughts of suicide. He's doing amazing work, and I encourage you to reach out to him if you need someone to talk to. And I encourage you to reach out to him if you want to support the work that he's doing. As he mentioned, you can reach him online. His website, www.umtr, the number 2, and then me.org, umtr2me.org. His email address is info@umtr2me.org. And the phone number, if you'd like to call, is area code 760-440-UMTR. And those numbers, the last 4 digits, are 8687. So I encourage you to reach out to him. I'll also include in the show notes Twitter and Facebook links. If you'd like to connect with me, feel free to send me an email, marcus@marcuswatson.com. And don't forget, that's Marcus with a K. Well, thanks so much for being here, and I will see you next time here on Spiritual Life and Leadership.